So like I said before, today's session is a little bit different to our normal one. So we want it to be a bit more interactive, and we really want to hear your thoughts on educational leadership and what it means to you. So as you can see from this slide, today's session, I'm joined by our course director, Dr. Alex Gardner-Mctaggart, and myself, Daisy James. So the title is Educational Leadership and Global Crisis. So Alex is going to talk to you about the importance of strong leaders, strong leadership of change. So just a little bit about who I am. So my name is Daisy. I'm your course advisor. So I've got over 4 years of experience within the student recruitment and higher education space. Here at the University of Manchester, I manage a variety of different online and blended learning courses. So they can be in the form of CPD courses, postgrad certificates, masters. The MA in Educational Leadership and Practice, which is a course that you've expressed an interest in, is something that falls and sits within my portfolio. So my main role is to really offer you as prospective students support and guidance at every stage of your application journey. I'm responsible for delivering webinars such as this one, and also individual consultations with prospective students like yourself. Now, I can see a few familiar names on today's call. I have had conversations with you over Zoom already, so it's nice to see you. Thanks for joining. If you do want to speak with me over Zoom and have an individual consultation with me to discuss kind of your goals, motivations, and obviously the course in more detail, I'd be more than happy to get something booked in and support you. Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you now to kind of introduce yourself and lead this webinar, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much for that introduction, Daisy. Yeah, so that's me. There you see a picture of me. I look a bit different from that today because I'm, like you probably, I'm at home under COVID restrictions. I'm actually in the first floor of my house here in the Alps in Austria, and we just had a cold snap. So it's 2 degrees outside. It's freezing cold. Hence, I'm wearing a hat, if you can see that, which you probably can't. But yeah, so I've been doing educational leadership for a very long time now. I'm currently at the University of Manchester as lecturer and course director on this MA in Leadership in Practice in Education. Prior to that, I was at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, where I was senior lecturer in leadership and negotiation. And prior to that, I worked in all over the world, really, as a teacher, manager and teacher in all sectors of education, primary, secondary, tertiary, and further education. Other people who are part of our course here are the notable luminaries such as Professor Helen Gunter, who, if you know anything about educational leadership, you'll probably know about her. Also Dr. Steve Courtney, Dr. Paul Armstrong, Dr. Stephen Rayner, Dr. B. Hughes, to mention but a few of our team at Manchester Institute in Education. You can see some of them here. We've got some pictures of them. All of them in there, yes, that's right. Also, I forgot Dr. Drew Whitworth as well, and also Dr. Loretta Anthony Okeke. And I think I covered most of them. Yeah, so that's most of our team at MIE. So what do you think is the function of education given the crisis we're faced with? Now, I'm aware you've already had a question, which is, what do you think educational leadership is, right? That's a really important question. Before we answer this question here, let me hand over to you a little bit. And if you want to use the chat function below, if you just want to type in as briefly as you can, as concisely as you can, what do you think educational leadership is? Okay, so you can use that chat function right now. If you just type in there what you think educational leadership is. Don't be shy, because I can talk for hours about what it is, but I'd very much like to hear what you think it is. While I have a nice sip of my hot coffee here to warm me up on a cold day. I hope it isn't as cold where you are as where I am. It went from about 20 degrees, 15 degrees down to last night in a very short space of time. Well, I can't see anybody typing anything in there. Goodness me, so you're leaving it up to me now to define what educational leadership is. Is that right?
We've got a few questions come through, Alex, actually.
Okay. All right, can you read them out to me?
Of Of course I can, yeah. So Pamela, thanks for your comment. So she thinks strategy of how to prepare students for the future, whatever that may look like, which is great. So what are your thoughts, Alex, on that?
Yeah, well, so strategy is very closely interlinked with the idea of leadership and being a leader. So that's what a lot of leadership scholars would point out. That's the difference between, say, management and leadership, is that leaders strategize, they think long term, they think of big picture. And then the second part of that, preparing students for their futures, whatever that might be, absolutely. I mean, after all, what is it that we do in education? We apart from the many roles that we do in accompanying children and young people as they grow and become who they are, one of the key tasks that we have is looking at the world around us, and thinking of our students, and when they leave school or college or university, what world are they going into, and what tools are they equipped with to help shape that world and make it, as I think we'd all agree, a better place. So that's quite a good outline there, I think, of educational leadership, thinking long-term, strategizing about students' futures. So I'd agree with that.
Great, and we've had another one from Christine. Hi, Christine. I know we've spoken a few times. It's nice to see you. So Christine says to know what to do, when to do, and how to do it in a time like this.
Yeah, right. Okay. So for sure. I mean, that I think that would be the silver bullet, wouldn't it? To know what to do, how to do at a time like this. And so we're starting to warm to the topic now a bit, which is, how do you know what to do? How do you generate the knowledge that you need in order to know what to do? And one of the underlying things that we see coming out a lot from research, but also in theory, is the need for educational leaders in education, not just, not in the military or not in the NHS or wherever, but in schools and in education. It's a really core competence for leaders to be able to draw upon the resources they have. And the resources they have tend to be a whole faculty of usually well-qualified, experienced teachers who day to day deal with children and deal with the actual business of the school, which is children and learning and whatnot. And so it's actually also having the skill to be able to unlock and access that resource, which is the faculty and the teachers. And so I think that's a very important thing to know, because a lot of people expect in crisis, and this is very typical of crisis leadership, that everybody downs tools, everybody goes into shock, and there's one person who says, you do that, you do that, you do that. And that's very typical what you would see in command and control structures, like in the military, in times of extreme crisis, right? However, most of the time we're not in crisis. So what happens when we do come into a time of crisis? And in COVID, it's interesting because it is a crisis for sure, but it's a slow burn crisis. It's not like from one day to the next, our reality changes and a bomb goes off in the corner and everyone's in shock. It's not like that. We can see the change happening. We can see it all around us. So there is time as it's happening to marshal your thoughts and your resources. But that was a really good impetus. Thank you very much for that question.
Thanks, Alex. We've got a couple more actually, which is really nice to see some thoughtful answers coming through. So Darwin thinks, or has said, that educational leadership means the power of God and develop the core values of good and quality education for learners.
Say again.
Educational leadership means the power of God and develop the core values of good and quality education for learners. Which
Darwin is that? That's not Darwin, Charles Darwin. That's modern Darwin, is it?
This is someone who is joining us today, has just said that on the chat function.
Darwin is saying this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were citing a paper or something, or Charles Darwin. Sorry, Darwin. For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that educational leadership is certainly, has a lot to do with belief systems, with values. Let's not forget that that values are a core element of what education is, and morality is a part of that, as are ethics, And so the way that we then choose to levy values and morality and ethics in educational environments marks out the school or the college or the university or the nursery. And that's very often what parents and even educators will find attractive or unattractive about a school, is how the school culture is built. And school culture is very much about morality and about values and standards and these things. And so in other areas of the world where, for example, values may not be so important, let's think now about, I don't know, perhaps industry or consumer society, where people might say they have values, but really actually what they're interested in is making money. In education, we might argue that it's quite different, in that making money out of children itself is a practice that's not particularly ethical, and that in this way, we as educational leaders need to be focused upon a clear and positive set of values that nurture children and young people, and have no self-interest at all in that process, other than to see those people succeed to the best ability that they can. And part of that process, vital process of that, is instilling values in young people and young adults, or let's say framing those values to give people something either to follow, or something to find as a counterpoint to orient themselves by, in order to find themselves in that pathway to becoming an adult and a grown-up and a member of society. And it's an incredibly complex process, and it's one that we as educators are deeply privileged to be a part of with many, many people throughout our lives. And I think that's part of the great appeal of being an educator, is that at least every educator I've ever met, or let's say most of them, you don't get into the job because you want to drive a Porsche. You don't get into the job because you want to have all those fantastic holidays and wear designer gear. Your raison d'être, your reason in the world is not about making money. It's about making people. It's about making change in the world. And so I think, absolutely, I think that is something that resonates strongly in educational leadership, and that marks in many ways the difference between educational leadership and other forms of leadership.
Great, thanks, Alex. And Gareth, it's nice to see you. Thanks for your comments. So Gareth said, to support staff, guide students, engage the community, and set the direction of the school.
Oh, that sounds like an excellent, very nicely phrased definition. Yeah, I think you've got all concepts in there, really. You've got most of it in there. Now, let's not forget, right, that there are many, many different views of educational leadership, which is why I'm asking you guys as well. I have my views and other people have theirs, and some views are contested more and some are contested less. And but what you just said there is a good summation of, let's say, if we were to condense it down into one or two sentences, for sure. You want to set direction. That's a key point of leadership, is finding direction and then setting it. And also, I think what you said, if I can paraphrase it, it's also about influence. So people often mistake leadership with things like, a big salary or a big office or a big desk or everybody smiling whenever I talk, or wearing a suit, or, kind of corporate demeanor, really. And actually leadership is very simple. I mean, this is the first lesson I learned when I used to work at Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Leadership is simply about influence. That's all it is. And you can influence with a smile, or you can influence with a sword. How you decide to do it is then up to you. But ultimately, you want to be as successful as you can be in that process of influence. And by in a social environment like a school, people in schools don't get ordered to be there. They choose to go there. They also put up with a lot of stuff. In many contexts, they put up with lower pay than they should actually have, and probably more hours than they should be working, and probably with a lot of grief. That means, unpleasant things from people who don't understand what they're doing. And so really what keeps them in the job is their sense of, community, very often, being part of a good team. And I think to be able to marshal that resource of collegiality and teamwork, I think is absolutely crucial to an educational leader in setting direction and influencing people.
Brilliant, thanks Alex. So I'm going to move along the slides now, but to all of those on the call today, as Alex is talking to you about kind of what education is and what leadership is, do have a think about these two questions, and do feel free to add some more thoughts into the chat function. We can absolutely cover those towards the end. But thanks to everyone who's added their thoughts already. That was a really nice discussion.
Yeah, so this is Ivan Illich, who wrote in the meantime, rather famous book called Deschooling Society in 1971, year that I was born, funnily enough. Ivan Illich, yeah, his ideas, for some people they're way out there, for other people they're absolutely tenable. But what he does is raise very interesting questions about the nature of society and the nature of schooling, represented in this quotation here. School is the advertising agency which makes you believe that you need the society as it is, right? So that's a really, I think, thought-provoking quotation from his book, Deschooling Society. Of course, as you can see by looking at the quote, what he's saying there is that schools and teachers and obviously educational leaders are the people who reiterate what society is to children, and children grow up understanding that the way things are is the way things should be, and that everything is fine as it is. So another one of his famous quotes, he says, the classroom is the second womb. You know, that the mother creates the fetus, creates the child, which is the biological being, but the school creates the persona, the personality, and the social equilibrium that is the social being. So it's like the second birth happens in the classroom. So yeah, essentially, what is education? That was that question from before. And well, you know, education is different from other sectors. It works to develop children and adults, right? So right there at the beginning, we've got a premise which is not quite in tune with, let's say, you know, the bigger issues in the world at the moment, which are all about, you know, making money and paying the bills and all these very instrumental things. It starts off with a premise which isn't necessarily about that, it's about people. So education, it educates discrete knowledge in subject areas. Yeah, so you've got your different subject areas like physics and geography and, you know, drama or whatever. It facilitates skills too. So in some societies more than in others, in others less. So for example, where I am now in Austria, there's a very strong skills-based education system where about 50% of young people leave school age 18 with a full completed apprenticeship. In Britain, where I'm from, that's not the case. It's about 9% of young people leave the education system with an apprenticeship. And there are, of course, then corresponding societal issues that emerge from that, which we can all read about in newspapers and see on television. Yeah, as Illich says, you know, education forms the social being. Doesn't form the biological being, because that's what your mum did, you know. But the person who we are in society, it doesn't entirely form us, of course, because we're also formed by our family, and we're formed by our friends, and we're formed by the clubs we belong to and the societies we belong to, and possibly, you know, the places where we go and meet people at the weekend, and the books that we read and all these other things. But school has a very, very strong influence upon who we are and who we become. It's an endeavor that is focused around human development, and education is about people, as I said before. And ultimately, and I think this is really core in understanding educational leadership, education is a social practice, right? It's not a business practice. It's not an individual practice. It's not a personal practice. It's a social practice. Unless, of course, you have a personal tutor at home, and one for every subject who comes and visits your child, as was common in the Middle Ages, amongst people who were, you know, the nobility. Then perhaps it was a personal process. But in wider society and in real terms, education is a social practice. Right. So yeah, this sort of ties in nicely with the questions that you were answering at the beginning. So what is educational leadership and what are we responsible for? Well, again, leadership is influence, right? So it connotes power. It is interlinked with power. We all know that. To pretend that leadership isn't connected with power is to either be very, very naive or to be very involved in leadership and not want to admit it. Leadership requires followers, otherwise there wouldn't be a leader, would there? So there's this dialectic that transpires, almost one could say an antagonistic dialectic or not, depending upon how you approach the idea of the leader and the followers, right? The idea originates from elitism. Now, you can argue and disavow this as much as you like, but that's the truth of the matter. We see leadership coming out of people who had power over others. Let's take the biggest example, kings and queens of ancient times, right? The nobility, the aristocracy, these were people who had power over others. And so up until even about 50, 60 years ago, for many people, leadership was considered to be a birthright, not something you could learn. And things have changed a lot since then, of course, thankfully. So it's the knowledge generation for leadership, i.e., how do we know what we know about leadership? Well, most of that knowledge has come from business, from the section of business. And I won't get into it now. It's a fascinating lecture, that one, on how leadership comes from the aristocracy through the martial into the military and then ends up manifesting in business, right? But I won't go into it now. It's for another time. If you enroll on the course, it's in there. But what actually does happen is that business models and practices have massively informed how we understand educational leadership. Now, that might pose a big question mark for you. You might go, why on earth would business be so important in understanding education? And that is probably one of the most curious things that we'll find in a study of educational leadership. But anyway, moving on. People are leaders at different times and in different contexts. So it's quite, I think, inaccurate to say there is one leader in a school. If you're really honest with yourself, you look around a school, college, nursery, anywhere where education is done, and you'll find leadership being done by different people at different times. And human beings are very good at that. We have this innate social aspect to us where we recognize leadership when it occurs and when it's relevant. And if we're honest with ourselves, we allow it to happen as well. So for example, if you have a particular skill in one area or you have more influence in one area, you might be a leader at one time or another, but then not at other times, right? So actually, there are lots of leaders in schools. Let's not forget too that leadership is a top-down term, right? Leadership is not, well, let's all sit around in a circle and hold hands and all be exactly the same as everybody else. The moment you invoke the term leadership, you invoke a hierarchy. That's what you do. And so again, the term leadership in more advanced circles is also a contested term as well, because by pointing out someone as a leader, you automatically exclude other people from that particular role and you privilege one person over others, right? Again, another fascinating debate, but not something I'm going to get into right now. Moving on. Okay, so you're all here because I imagine you work in education, you're teachers or teacher leaders or teacher managers or school counselors or lecturers or kindergarten and nursery teachers, one of those things, right? So why would a course like this be interesting for you? Well, obviously, the reason why it's interesting is because it gives you the tools, the credentials, the acumen to be able to go out into the world and reposition yourself in a stronger way, in a way that is authentically valid for the person who's going to give you or not give you the job, right? That's why a lot of us will do master's degrees, is we'll do it for a career purpose. However, the other side that's quite beneficial on a master's degree is the fact that it actually develops your intellect. You know, that's the whole purpose of it. And it develops, by developing your intellect, it develops you as a person. So you're never quite the same person you were after a master's degree that you were before a master's degree. So it doesn't just help you with the sort of instrumental side of things in terms of jobs. It actually changes a little bit who you are and how you think about the world. And that is probably all well and good, because a good master's degree, such as I would hope this one is something that challenges you to engage with yourself and with your own thinking by looking at the world and looking at the research and looking at the theories and continually reflecting back on yourself and thinking and putting your thinking in uncomfortable positions where you're going to be challenged and your thinking might be torn down, or it might be rebuilt again, it might be encouraged. But these are all interesting spaces that need to happen, or interesting things that need to happen in safe spaces, like in the environment of a master's degree, such as this one, where you can challenge yourself and try new things. So in your career, obviously, it would help give you the tools to be a principal of a school, or a head, or a board member, a middle manager, a curriculum coordinator, all these type of roles. I found personally, and I know lots of people will say this, when I did my masters, a fair old time ago now, it did literally reinvigorate my practice. I got to a point where I was, teaching too much and a little bit tired of it all. And it really repositioned me back in my seat as a teacher and as a teacher leader, and made me realize, you know what, this is one of the most important things that there is to do. And I am in a very important position here doing it. And my work is significant and meaningful and much, much, much more in depth and meaningful than I thought it was before. It can also help you be the change in your education organization, because it gives you those critical tools that you need in order to be able to get to engage at high levels in those top conversations, where often we feel like we're sidelined, or we don't quite know what to say, or what people are referring to. It changes that irrevocably. You are then the person who does know what they're talking about. You do know all the debates. You do know what leadership means and how it's enacted, and what the consequences are of leadership. It allows you to grow your network as well, because not only do you have our blended and online medium, which is where you engage with other potential leaders such as yourself, or current leaders, meaning that you've got all of these people, at the end of a phone or an email, and they're all over the world as well. And it's quite a small cohort. There's only about 20 of you. So it's quite an intimate cohort too. And they're all people like you. They're all going places in education. So it's a great network to have. But it also means that you meet with all of us as well at the university. You get to know us. So it's not just distant that you see us through a computer screen. We actually meet in our conferences. You work with us. You get to know us. And beyond that, you get to know the people who are involved in the course, the sort of external invited speakers and things like that. Yeah, I mentioned this before. What will you learn? Well, you'll learn intellectual skills. We all take intellectual skills for granted. However, we often don't work enough on them, and that's what this does. It pushes you into an intellectual space, which, if you are teachers, and which I found through teaching on this course, it's a space that most teachers are very hungry for. It's where they want to be. It's part of the reason they got into the job, is because they are fascinated and interested in intellectualism, especially ambitious teachers. That's where they want to be. And they want to foreground their thoughts and have them challenged and challenge other people's and grow in that way. And that's how you do grow. So it really does open up a whole level of intellectual knowledge and grow those intellectual skills, things that you think about in your own quiet time, but you don't actually say. This course then brings these out into the world. It makes you confident about those things, because they've been revised, rethought, retried, re-challenged to the extent that you are a bigger intellectual after a course like this. Practical skills. Yeah, of course, you can apply research to your workplace. This is a really important thing in education. If you want people to buy into what you're doing, if you want to influence people in schools, from the board members all the way down to the students or the parents, or teachers, or anyone in the school or college or nursery, if you can convincingly and authentically provide research findings that tell people why things are a good idea, not just because you dreamed it up late one evening, but because the research tells us this. That makes you very powerful in terms of your influence in a school. And then also, of course, transferable skills, you know, so all of these things here are very, very good in terms of, you know, doing other things in the world, communicating and all that kind of stuff. Okay, next slide. Right, what to expect in semester one. So this is a 2-year course. There are 6 units that you study, and then you do a final research suite and a research project at the end. So the first unit is called Models of Educational Leadership. That's about 2 months, followed by engaging with educational leadership research. Do get back to me afterwards if you want me to go into any more depth about these. I'll whiz through them at the moment. Next slide, please. Then we have Leading Educational Change and Development, and then Educational Leadership Policy. Next slide. Then in semester 3, we have Educational Leadership as a Social Practice. Now, the last unit is one that you can either choose to do APL in, which is accreditation for prior learning, meaning that if you've done master's level study before, you can have it accredited here and have that semester or that half semester free, or you can do one of our optional units. We have Digital Media and Information Literacy, Leading Learning Still in Development, and with them, of course, we have very special, which only exists on this master's degree, is International School Leadership. Then after that, we have, next slide, semester 4, we have half of that is the research skills suite, the other half is the project that you write. That would be like your thesis that you do at the end, but instead of doing a big thesis, we have kind of half-sized thesis here, and the other half is focused upon those research skills I was telling you about earlier, you know, building you into a very authentic and strong researcher yourself. Next slide. Okay, so the practical details of the course are that we have face-to-face workshops at conferences. These are held twice a year in our Manchester Centre. So you're on the course for 2 years because it's part-time, meaning you do 4 conferences where you come to Manchester, you're part of the university, you come to the Manchester Institute of Education, and you are taught by and lectured to by our core faculty, such as those people I mentioned before. We have also, those 20 credit modules I was talking about just now. It's around about 15 hours of study per week. Of course, it's different per person, you know, but we recommend about 15 hours a week. There are no exams. You have practical and reflective assessments, and it's a 2-year part-time course. There we go. Okay, over to Daisy.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Alex. It is worth mentioning that we are also running this course in our Dubai centre, so in the Middle East, and we're launching in Shanghai over in China in February 2021. So depending on where you choose to study, so which centre you select, which is closest to kind of where you're based, you will then kind of come onto campus, so either in Manchester in the UK, Dubai or Shanghai. Now, I am obviously based here in Manchester, which is quite grey today and surprisingly not rainy, which is great. But I also have, I work very closely with my colleagues in Shanghai and Dubai. So if you do wish to discuss the programme and kind of what to expect in either of those locations, get in touch with me and I can introduce you to my lovely colleagues in Shanghai or Dubai. Now, before we wrap up, we've had another kind of question or statement about what education and leadership is. So Alex, I'm going to read this out to you and just get your thoughts on it. So somebody said educational leadership is about designing instructions and inspiring the team. I think it is fully guiding and supporting your team and being patient to provide good resources and techniques, as well as being able to adapt to your school and team for any circumstances. So Alex, what are your thoughts on that? I thought that was quite a nice statement from one of our prospective students on today's call.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, that's what educational leaders are tasked with doing. Whether they then actually do it like that is in the question, isn't it? You know, it's you want to support people in your environment, you want to support teachers, you want to be able to adapt. You know, you don't want to walk into a school and say, right, this is how I am, and this is how you're all going to be this time next year, right? You don't want to do that, do you? But we see that happen on a regular basis, right? You know, the many educational leaders take a personality cult with them wherever they go. And they're the best people at pretending they don't have one when they get there. And 2 years later, you find out, oh, now the school's running exactly like that person is. So I really appreciate that contribution there. You know, absolutely, educational leaders should be able to adapt to the schools that they go to. I agree with that opinion too. I think that the strength of the school or the college or the nursery lies in what is already there. And a good, strong educational leader is able to be able to see what's there, provide direction to that, and let them get on with being who they are without necessarily drastically changing the culture or the people or anything. Unless, of course, you know, there is a crisis going on, or unless, of course, that is the actual remit. You know, you're being told, go in there and change the culture because I know there's a culture of bullying, for example, in which case, yes, absolutely. You probably want to change the culture and adapt things and steer things away. But this is quite interesting because I really do like that question, because a lot of research focuses upon challenges and upon issues and upon barriers and upon things that go wrong in education. And you know what? Most of education actually works quite well, and it goes quite well, and schools function quite autonomously, and there's a lot of trust in the profession, and that kind of trust is really important in order to make schools work well. And what all of these practices do that come in and assert a different culture and these kind of things is that they take away trust. And by taking away trust, they take away motivation, they take away innovation, they take away individuality, and you end up with this kind of, you know, formatted, one size fits all, boring environment where everybody has to. We see it today in academies in Britain. You know, teachers in academies in Britain, or not Britain, sorry, in England, are told what clothes they have to wear to go to school. Children are equally told, you know, they're told how to set up and arrange their chairs in their classrooms. And in one particular academy trust that I know of, every single school in that academy trust has to have tables and chairs set up in a particular way. So what you see there is this real kind of branding, like a corporatization of education that's happening. And what we have to ask ourselves as educators is A, is this in our best interests? Do we approve? B, is it in the children's best interests? And C, who are these people who are telling us these things? Do they even know anything about education? And, you know, ultimately what you'll often find is that they don't. They've often been drafted in from different sectors, but usually business. But because business is very, you know, dominant, especially in leadership, this sees our education spaces becoming something that maybe they don't need to be. Yeah, great question, or great prompt. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. I've got a couple more questions which I'd like to cover, really. So Christine's asked a question about, could we explain, or could you explain, Alex, a little bit more about the International School Leadership module?
Very, very gladly, absolutely.
I knew you'd like that question.
I don't have the spec in front of me, but that's actually, yeah, that's my specialization, really. So there's not many of us around the world who do international schools leadership. There's probably about a handful of us. I'm one of them. And it's interesting because the international schools, I mean, you know, there are 500,000 staff in the meantime in international schools. You'd be surprised to know possibly that there are 485,000 teachers in England. So you've actually got more staff in international schools than you have teachers in England around the world, educating over 5 million students annually, with a turnover well north of $50 billion a year. This is an enormous sector in the meantime, and yet hardly anything is taught or known about its leadership, which is very confounding, because in that unit there, we get into a little bit about what's different about international schools and why it's different being a leader in them, and what are the different challenges. And trust me, they are quite different. You can't just come at an international school with your set of, this is what it's like in my home country, this is what it's going to be like in an international school set of assumptions, because it won't work like that, because they are unique places. And I say that both optimistically and pejoratively as well. They can be awful places of injustice and inequality, right? It's something people don't talk about, but they can also be wonderful places of hope and progressive futures and progressive outlooks for students. So there's a real dichotomy in there between what they are, and what's centrally important and what comes out strongly in that unit is how you, as a leader in that situation, how you can draw upon the knowledge that's there, anticipate the pressures that are coming your way, and still build and foster and nurture an environment and a faculty and a body of students who can realistically engage in the world and potentially move on and make the world a better place and do what organizations such as Council of International Schools or the International Baccalaureate might say, which is, let's make the world a better place. And that's all well and good on paper, and often it stops in the school. So how do you become the locomotive of change there in the school as an educational leader and keep those things going? I'll stop right there, otherwise I'll go on for hours. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Alex. Now, I am conscious of time, but I've had a few more thoughts come through or questions, so I do want to just cover them in the next kind of 5 or 10 minutes. So Pamela has asked, how strong is the faculty research on digital education? Now, I know that sits with another member of your team, Alex, but are you able to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, basically world leading. So you'd be hard pressed to find another faculty offering what we offer that has our level of expertise in that area. The person who's actually directly involved in the course, who's been involved from the very beginning, is Dr. Drew Whitworth, who's a reader in digital technologies, whose work in the area is unique and seminal. Just give him a Google, Drew Whitworth. Yeah, so he leads on that course, particularly. That's the one that he's written as well. He also concurrently leads a similar couple of master's degrees within the university itself. So yeah, I mean, any good university worth its salt has a very developed digital arm to it, and you know, MIE is no exception there at all. In fact, I'd say world leading.
Thank you, Alex. And one thing to mention about Drew Whitworth, obviously Alex has touched on him before. Myself and Drew will be running a similar webinar such as kind of this one today, talking about kind of digital education. So Pamela and the rest of you guys on the call, I'll send you an invite once that's all confirmed. And if you are interested, do absolutely join. Drew's a great guy, so he'll give some good insights into that particular unit. So Alex, thanks so much for your time today, and thanks to everyone on the call, and thank you for your patience at the beginning. Technology wasn't on our side today, first time ever, so that's pretty good going, but yeah, thank you so much for your patience. Alex, thanks for your time, and I'll send this recording out to you all so you can have a listen back. But it's been a great discussion and I hope you found it insightful. Again, my role is to really support you make your kind of next steps and decision making, really. So please do get in touch with me if you want to discuss kind of your application or kind of next steps. Now, one thing to mention about the application for February 2021, because that's our next intake, we've not yet opened for recruitment yet, but we will be doing so in the next kind of couple of days or next week. So once I've got our new application form, I'll send that out to you and I'll happily kind of walk you through what that looks like and what we need from you to kind of make this happen for you. So again, thanks for joining. Alex, is there anything you'd like to add?
I just had a little thing there from Darwin saying, learn to think critically as the function of education in the crisis we are faced now. Absolutely agree with you there, Darwin. Critical thinking is in decline at the moment, unfortunately, around the world, as we can see by populist movements and the age of, post-truth. Thinking critically is vital to us as educators. Not thinking to be critical of others, but to think critically, to think in detail and exactly, to find the sources of knowledge and to understand what is truth and what is false. These things are vitally important, and I'm not sure, and I think you'll agree with me possibly, that we are preparing future generations quite as well as we could do, and ourselves possibly, for the massive information that we are now surrounded with the internet, for example. So I think that's a really important thing to take away from this, from the COVID crisis as well, is, thinking critically. We can see around us, all of us in our various countries are faced with difficult problems about dealing with this COVID crisis and dealing with it in education, and being able to authentically say, this is what affects change, this is what makes things better, and that is what makes them worse, and then implementing that, as evidence shows us right now from COVID, that is the difference between being ultimately frustrated with tens of thousands of deaths in your country to actually having a very, let's say, light experience of the whole thing. Just a very brief example, I'm in Austria. This is where my home is, although I live and work in Manchester too. Austria had one of the lightest cases of COVID-19. Why? Because the government reacted very quickly to the science, put measures in place, which people followed, and since that time it's been quite light. In Britain, on the other hand, when I was back in Manchester just a couple of weeks back, the situation is quite different. And so I think that's a big lesson to take away from it. Thank you for that, Darwin.
Thanks, Alex. And just very quickly, I've had another question about kind of the degree certification. So Amani's asked whether the word online will be written on your degree certificate upon successful completion. Now, it won't be. It'll just state that you have successfully completed a Master's in Educational Leadership and Practice from the University of Manchester. So the word online won't be anywhere on your degree certification. I know that a lot of students do ask that question. So Amani, hopefully that answered that for you. Again, thank you so much, everybody. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and speaking to you soon.
Thanks, Daisy.
Thanks, Alex. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.